Always willing to stand up and speak out, JJ French is on a mission. As a founding member of the heavy metal band Twisted Sister, this rock icon was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2018. And tonight, he's urging you to turn up the volume in the fight to end prostate cancer.
Hi, everybody. I'm JJ French, the guitar player and founder of the band Twisted Sister, and welcome to the ZERO Prostate Cancer Summit. The reason why I'm talking to you tonight is because of my journey with prostate cancer. My journey with prostate cancer began way before I was ever diagnosed. In fact, it came at a time that I least expected to really care about prostate cancer. And that was at the peak of Twisted Sister's popularity. Now, we all know the song "We're Not Gonna Take It." It's one of the most famous anthems in the world. It's on an album called Stay Hungry. That album was recorded in May of 1984. We started promoting the tour, traveling around the world. Sometime around August, I get a phone call from my dad who says, you know, they found something and they want me to go to the hospital and check it out. And so next thing you know, I'm told he has cancer. And this is while I'm touring on my biggest record. And it just so happened that we were playing in the US at that point. So I was able to fly back to New York City every Sunday to see my dad during a particular period, which was essentially from late September to mid-October of 1984, just as the album was really peaking and our videos were everywhere, because you've seen those videos everywhere. And I would come home every Sunday and my father would be deteriorating every week. And I don't know how your relationship is with your dad. My dad and I didn't have a great relationship. We patched things up in the later years, and I'm very grateful that we did. But it just so happened that on this one particular day, I called the doctor and said, listen, I can not come home this Sunday. I can come home the following Sunday, if that's okay. And he says, no. You need to come home next Sunday. Your father's not going to last. And I said, what do you mean? They said, I know that we told you he had 6 months to live, but he may only have a week to live. And so what did I do? I called the record label and I said, my God, is the album platinum? And they said, yeah, it will be. It'll be platinum in a couple of days. I said, can you make a platinum record and get it to my father? Please do that. And they said they would. So I finished that week. I flew home. I get to the hospital. My brother's there. We walk in the hospital room. My father's lying there. And he says, I want to die at home. And we went, okay, we'll go get pajamas and we'll take you home. And I ran out of the store. I ran out of the hospital to a store on Broadway near the hospital, bought the pajamas. When I came back up from the elevator, my brother was standing there saying, he just passed away. Just before that occasion, we went for a walk with my dad down the hallway, and he put his arm around me and my brother, and he just said, I love you. And I have to tell you, I don't know how your parents are. My parents didn't use the word love very much. So it was like one of the few times he ever said that to me. And it was unbelievably meaningful, but I couldn't believe it was going to end like this. And lo and behold, he passed away. So now a week goes by after the service, the funeral service. And my wife at the time said, by the way, you know, the album came. And I said, did he know that the album went platinum? She goes, yeah, in fact, I took a photo. You know, in those days, we didn't have phones we didn't have cameras in our phones, and we didn't have instant access to this stuff. So of course, she took the film and had to send it out to Kodak. And it took a couple of weeks for Kodak to send it in, and we got the photos back. And there's a photo I have, which is actually in my book, which just came out, called Twisted Business. Is a photo of me, photo of my father actually holding the album. So he died on the day that Stay Hungry went platinum. And of course, we were a working band, and I didn't really have time to grieve. I had to go back out to work, and I did, which was a good thing, keep my mind off it. But the fact is that we didn't know that he died of prostate cancer yet. We had no idea. We just know he died of cancer. The word came out that he died of prostate cancer about a month later. We sat down with his doctor, who had the autopsy report, And it explained in detail the journey of his cancer throughout his body. And what happened ultimately was it got into his bones. By that time, of course, it's all over. And my father never went to the doctor. So my brother and I realized that the cancer started in the prostate, according to the autopsy report, and that he probably was living with it for years. At that point, I was, 84? So I was 32. My brother was 42. My brother and I looked at each other like, well, do you think that this is going to be in our future? So we started really to pay attention. And my brother really started paying attention. And lo and behold, as the years went by, his PSA started going up and going up. And when he hit 66, he developed prostate cancer.
Straight talk about music and beyond is the focus of the French Connection, JJ's podcast. With 5 decades in the music industry, he's got lots to share with his listeners. But he's also using this podcast to talk about his own cancer journey in hopes that other men will take control of their own health.
My brother, former school teacher, also decided he needed to learn as much as he could. And in the interim, he started reading everything that he could, so that by the time he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, he knew what to do. He knew what his journey was, his pathway. And so he proceeded to have radiation. And that was about 15 years ago, and he's fine. He has been fine. I watched this, and at just about the time that he was getting his radiation, my PSA number started to encroach the magic 4, which in America, people go and get a biopsy after 4. So I had my first biopsy, and it was negative. And then the PSA went up about a year later, and I had another biopsy, and that was also negative. But I started to research biopsies because I wanted to know why the number, how that number changes, because it does kind of change. I learned a couple of really fascinating facts about PSA. Fact 1, any sexual activity whatsoever within 48 hours of a PSA blood test can change your PSA up to 20%. That means if your PSA is, let's say, 5, and you had any kind of sexual activity prior to that test, it actually could have been less than 4. But because you stimulated the prostate, it changed the number. I also found out that blood taken for a blood test to determine your PSA can also be up to 20% off if the blood isn't refrigerated within 2 hours. Now, this is all stuff that I asked my urologist about because I read about it, but he didn't tell me this information, which really, I said, why don't you talk to people about this? Well, you don't ask. What do you mean you don't ask? This is information. People need to know this stuff. I was astounded that they didn't make this known to their patients. So again, the prostate number, the PSA number, kept going up and down and fluctuating. At one point, I registered to 6.4 and then went back to test a week later because after abstaining from sex and changing laboratories, and it was down to 5.3. I mean, that is a huge difference. That is a significant difference. That's the difference between taking a biopsy and not taking a biopsy. Well, the number did eventually creep up again. I took a third biopsy and it came out negative. At that point, I said, there's got to be a better way. There has to be a better way to avoid the biopsies. And so I switched urologists. And the new urologist that I went to said, look, we have developed a further advanced clinical analysis. And that analysis is based on a combination of a biopsy and an MRI. And the MRI will track and show us how things look right now based on that biopsy, which would mean that possibly over the next year or so, instead of having to do another biopsy, we just take another MRI and we put it up against the other one. Now, this is an example of how technology comes into play here. It's really important because when you're talking about things like prostate cancer, technology matters. Everything gets better. Everything gets more refined. Everything gets more specific. The resolution of the cameras and the resolution of the devices used to measure things that are going to impact your life get better and better and better and better and better. The follow-up MRIs over the next couple of years look good, and everything seemed to be kind of calm. My PSA was high, but it was holding, And again, you will learn about PSA because PSA, it's not the number necessarily, it's the activity in the number. It's movement that creates this concern that there's cancerous activity going on in the prostate. So again, in my case, an MRI showed a spot that didn't look good compared to previous MRIs. And I was told they really needed to do a fifth biopsy. And frankly, it was that fifth biopsy that showed the cancer. Now, this had taken a period of this is over 10 years. In that 10-year period of time, man, I read everything I could. And I started talking to my friends who had prostate cancer. In fact, I would say to people, did you have prostate cancer? Because it's not something you offer up at a dinner party. You really kind of have to know somebody, and then you have to pull them aside and say, listen, I just got to ask you a question. You have prostate cancer. And surprisingly, a lot of guys I know had prostate cancer. So I started saying, well, how did you find out you had prostate cancer? What procedures did you use for prostate cancer? How much research did you ascertain before you made your decision? And I got answers all over the map. To I had no idea, and boom, I had it, and this is what I did. And how are you? I'm fine. Fine. Well, they wouldn't give me much specifics because they never asked. I said, well, do you ever ask your doctor your numbers after the tests? No, not really. He just tells me I'm fine. I said, you don't know exactly what he said? You haven't read the reports? No. So I'm kind of sitting there going, why is that? Like, what is it? It's like, I don't want to sound like Larry David and the neurotic guy that, needs to know everything. But frankly, this is your health. This is your life. How do you decide to not want to know exactly what you need to know? At that point, I already knew the doctor, the hospital, and the procedure. That's how much I had it. So even though I did not want to hear those words that said, oh yeah, you have prostate cancer. What made things even weirder was that they said you had a Gleason 9. Now, for those of you who deal in the prostate cancer world, that's a liar, liar, pants on fire number. That's scary. And I thought to myself, well, how ironic. I've been watching this for 10 years and I went from nothing to a Gleason 9. And that really freaked me out because it shows you the volatility of what happens when it decides to transform itself into a cancerous activity. And so they did a radical prostatectomy, and in the process of analyzing the tumors after they were removed, it turned out it was a Gleason 7, not a 9. And the decision was that I didn't need radiation, which was the good news. So essentially I went in, I had the operation, and that was it. And I take my blood tests all the time.
In 2021, JJ partnered with ZERO and Bayer to create the We're Not Gonna Take It campaign. From television to radio to digital, JJ and his message struck a chord with millions of men around the country.
Surviving, it's one thing. Follow-up is another thing. But in the last year, I know 3 men whose prostate cancer came back after 10 years, 12 years, and 14 years. And that's not usual, but it does happen. And I asked them, would you mind reporting back to me what happened to you how did you proceed? What did your doctor suggest? And they all had radiation. And they all went through a process, I think, of 39 rounds of radiation. And in each particular case, from what I have been told, it did what it had to do. It destroyed the cancer cells that somehow were popping up in places, and their lives go on. That may be an unusual case, but the point is that putting your head in the sand is never good. In any point in this journey, it is never good. Once you are diagnosed with it, in my mind, they may tell you you are cancer-free today, but you're never cancer-free in your brain. It's always there, which means you have to always watch. You can't be ignorant because ignorance kills. You can't be ill-informed. You have to ask questions. If you have a spouse, you have to bring them in on this. They have to be part of this with you and your family. You owe it to your family, you owe it to your spouse, you owe it to yourself to survive. And to survive, that means you learn. And there are so many technologies these days. There's so many advances. If you catch it early enough, you literally can walk out of a doctor's office today doing an in-office procedure called ablation, where they just basically blow up the tumor with heat, with radiation. There's a lot of different ways they ablate, but that is one way they can do it. They couldn't do that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30, forget it. No, that's kind of like in the last 2 years, they've come up with that kind of treatment. Freeze it out, burn it out, blow it up, whatever. I mean, this is fantastic medical stuff. This is because things are moving so quickly. That's why it's not a hopeless situation. That's why you have to advocate for yourself. You have to save yourself. You have to learn. Again, ignorance kills, and there's no reason to be ignorant. I decided to come forward with my story because I have a platform and I wanted to teach people. I wanted to tell them, and because of my podcast, the JJ French Connection, I had my urologist on last month. And then I got emails. Thank you so much. I learned so much. I really appreciate it. You know what? That means everything to me. There's a cliche in this world for people who help people, and it always goes the same way. If I can just help one person, and it sounds so cliche because you see it over and over and over again. I mean, you do hear it all the time. If my experience can just do one thing, and usually it has to do with selling a book, so they go, if I can just tell one person, maybe I can sell some books. And I don't want to be cynical about that, because when people put their life on the line and expose themselves that much, they really are taking a risk. I didn't talk about it at first, and then I said, hell with that. I have to talk about it. I have to educate. So seriously, if one of you pays attention to this and goes and gets checked, then really my job is done. And if 10 of you do, it's even done better. And if hundreds of you do, then I've really done my job. I don't get paid for this. I wouldn't take money for this. I'm doing it because you need to know, you need to learn, and I need to teach you. If you can take anything from this from me, please be your own advocate. I really want to thank the ZERO Prostate Cancer Summit for having me host this thing and giving me a platform to spread my knowledge and information to help you save your life. Thank you.
We'd like to say a special thank you to tonight's keynote speaker, JJ French, and to Bayer for their support of the ZERO Summit.